Okay, so this is the Bible study for Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 29, and we're continuing the story that we began last week in chapter 18. So the text for today says, "The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. 'My lords,' he said, 'please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way in the morning.' 'No,' they answered, 'we will spend the night in the square.' But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, 'Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them.' Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, 'No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof.' 'Get out of our way,' they replied. 'This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play judge. We'll treat you worse than them.' They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so they could not find the door. The two men said to Lot, 'Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against this people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it.' So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-laws who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, 'Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city.' But the sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of the dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, 'Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished.' When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his two daughters and led them safely out of the city. The Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, 'Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away.' But Lot said to them, 'No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared.' He said to him, 'Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it.' That is why the town was called Zor. By the time Lot reached Zor, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew these cities and the entire plain, destroying all of those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where he had lived. All right. So that's interesting. Lots of interesting stuff. Of course, this is a pretty famous story. I think most people who have been in church know this story. It is probably not a popular story in our modern culture because of some of the things it suggests about um, God's moral law and what sorts of things he punishes. So let's go on and continue in studying this. Remember that you can download a PDF copy of the Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. Number one says, what happened in last week's study? A, the Lord appeared to Abraham and three men were standing nearby. B, Abraham hurried to meet them and fed them and gave them water and rest. Yes. C, one of them affirmed God's promise to Abraham and Sarah, but Sarah laughed and then lied about it. That's true. God tells Abraham what he is going to do, and Abraham pleads for Sodom. That also happens. And then E, God agrees that he will not destroy the whole city if he can find even 10 people who are righteous. And it seems like uh, he was just short of 10. Um, it seems like um, 3 were saved, 6 were tried to be saved. Um, um, we can go on and talk about that here in a few moments, but certainly outside of Lot's household, every man in the city, young and old, we're told, participates in this, whatever this is, attack on the two angels that came. Number 2 says, what is happening now according to 19:1 and 2? A, the two angels arrived in Sodom. Wait, weren't there 3 men? Where is the third? What about the Lord? So um, there are 3 men that appeared to Abraham, and God is there, but it doesn't explicitly say in chapter 18 that God is one of the men. But one of the men is speaking to Abraham, and then the Lord is speaking to Abraham, and then only 2 show up in Sodom. So because the Lord remained talking to Abraham, so some of the commentaries that I read suggested that 2 of them were angels, 2 of these men, and 1 was the Lord himself. And that's why only 2 show up in Sodom. Um, that that's as plausible explanation as any. I don't, um, I don't know that sometimes we as humans, when God is appearing to us, I don't know that we sometimes fully understand the ways that He appears and the ways that his messengers appear. And if we had that sort of encounter, I'm not sure we'd be able to answer that question fully. But what we would be sure of is that God was speaking to us, and this was God's doing. Um, and of course, angels are messenger spirits or people that do the will of God, carry out the will of God. So in New Mexico, there's sort of a culture of almost like angel worship. There's a sense that many people think that people become angels when we go to heaven, which is not supported in Scripture. In fact, it seems to suggest entirely the contrary, that angels are created beings also, um, which is why so many things attributed to angels. Angels may be carrying something out, protecting somebody, whatever, but if they are, it is the work of God. It is they're carrying out the work of God. That's what angels do. So in Scripture, when we see um, angels. We see angels carrying messages. We see angels fighting battles. We see um, things like this, but all of that is doing the work and the will of God. However we interpret it, what's going on is the will and the work of God. Um, let's see, letter B, Lot. Remember Abraham's nephew. That's just in there in case you're not familiar with Scripture and maybe haven't been with us through previous Bible studies when we've been talking about that. Was sitting at the gateway of the city. So the men arrive, and Lot happens to be sitting there at the gateway of the city. The gateway of the city in biblical times was certainly particularly in Israel later on, was a symbolic place as much as it was a physical place. Um, and I don't know how much we can extrapolate that to this time and the fact that he was there. Um, Perhaps he was there specifically to protect people that came into the city because he knew what was going on in the city. It seems like that's the role that he takes on for these two men. Um, C, when Lot saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. True. D, Lot asked them to come to his house to clean up, rest up, spend the night, and leave early in the morning. He doesn't even ask them their business there, but he tells them you probably shouldn't stay here. You probably definitely shouldn't stay in the town square. Come to my house and then get on out of here as soon as you possibly can, is what it seems like. E, they said they would spend the night in the square instead, and they did say that. Number 3, what happened in 1903? Lot insisted strongly that they go with him to his house. And so let me just say that there's not a lot said. These men have come, we're told. God says, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? We're told that they've gone to see if the city is as bad as they've heard. Um, the outcry that's come up to God has been terrible, and they're seeing if it's that bad. And Abraham argues for him, God, to save the city if there's even 10 that are found righteous there. And we don't see these men sort of going house by house to figure out who's righteous and who isn't. But it seems that they found the righteous people as soon as they entered the city. That the one that came to protect them, Lot and his family, was the one that was righteous. And everyone else in the city came to his door after that. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, um, but so then we can pretty easily count who the righteous people in the city are and who the unrighteous are, simply by who opened their home to these men to protect them versus who came to attack. Um, Number 4, what about in 19:4 and 5? A, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old. Listen to this. All the men from every part of the city, both young and old, surrounded the house. Every man in the city, except for apparently Lot, surrounded the house. B, the men called out to Lot, asking where the men were who had come to him. So they know that there's people. The two men came to the city, and they have a plan for them, and they want to know where they went. C, the men from all over the city, both young and old, and I feel like I need to reemphasize that, demanded that Lot bring out the two visitors to their town so that they could, and I inserted this, all. I mean, this sounds crazy, honestly. This sounds ridiculous. So that they could have sex with him. All the men of the city. saw that two men came into the city, and their first response was not, we're going to kill them, they're dangerous. It was not, we're going to welcome them. We're so glad to have visitors. Their first response was, hey, here's some newcomers, some outsiders, some people that don't have families around here. And so we're going to bring them out so we can have sex with them. And I just want to kind of throw this out here. That sounds so crazy. And um, you might say that, I'm not saying, but you might say that as bad as our country has gotten, it hasn't come to this. I'm not so sure. For me, it's not even that they formed a mob and they wanted to rape these two men. It's that their sexuality was primary to them. That the first thing they thought of when visitors came to their city was, they are vulnerable, they are without support, we want to have sex with them. And I would argue that in our society, that seems to be the first thing that we think of too. That yeah, I don't know how far we need to go down this path, but honestly, sex seems to be at the forefront of everything we talk about. And we can't imagine a world in which gratifying our own sexual desires is not primary in our mind. So much so that it's the commercials on TV, the medications, the things that we're arguing for rights for, all have to do with our sexuality, as if that was a primary concern of our world and of our lives. And I would say that once that becomes the primary concern, we're not far from this being the way we think about life. Um, so, number 5 says, how did Lot respond according to 19:6 through 8? He said, no, don't do this wicked thing. So, not only did he not have that at the forefront of his mind, but he recognized, this is wicked, this is evil. I'm willing to stand in the gap and protect these men so that this wicked thing does not happen. B, he offered to bring out his two daughters who had never slept with a man, that they could do with them what they wanted. And this, for many of us, is astounding. And we have trouble processing that. And I just want to say, we don't believe that there are levels of sin, that one sin is worse than another, uh, and we wrestle with that a lot, because sometimes in practice it seems like there are levels of sin in the way that we treat sin in people's lives, perhaps. Um, we don't react as strongly to certain types of sin. But I would just say that um, Lot is more willing to offer his daughters up than these two men. Now, was that because they are vulnerable, they are guests, and he felt the responsibility to protect them? Was that because um, what these men were going to do with other men was so audacious, so crazy, so um, ungodly, um, that that he was it was more palatable for terrible things to be done to young girls than to consider that being done to men. I don't know. It seems like it. It seems like kind of all of the above. And see, he does note that these men are under his protection. So there's a certain sense that hospitality and protection is important. Um, Number six, what happened next, according to 19:9 through 13. They started to attack Lot because he was a foreigner and he was judging them, and they threatened to treat him even worse. Yeah, so they said, this foreigner, this guy's not even from here. And we know that, right? He came down there, but he's sitting in judgment on us. And so this was their cultural norm, and this outsider is saying, no, this is not okay. Um, and maybe it took somebody from outside to say, "Hey, what in the world are you doing? This is not okay." Let me just say that we, as Christians, are in the world but not of it. We are foreigners here. We are living. So sometimes it takes a foreigner living here to say, "Hey, what's going on here?" This whatever has become normal in our culture is not okay with God, and we've got to stand up. But they started to attack Lot over this. The men inside reached out and pulled Lot back inside. See, the men inside struck the men who were outside with blindness so that they could not find the door. So, um, they could protect themselves apparently. Um, and maybe all of this had to do with um, finding who was righteous in the town and seeing how Lot would respond. And it seems like Lot passed the test, if that's what it was. D, the two men asked Lot if he had anyone else in the city connected to his family. They told him that all needed to get out because they are going to destroy this place. So, okay, you got your wife and your kids here, your two daughters. Is there anybody else outside this house connected? And he says, well, I got two sons-in-laws. They're pledged to be married to my daughters. So he went to find them, and they thought he was joking. They laughed. So number seven says what happened in 1914 through 26. A, Lot went to speak to the men who were pledged to marry his daughters and warned them to get out, but they thought he was joking. Yes. B, when dawn came, the angels told Lot and his family to hurry and get out, or they would be swept away when the city is punished. Yeah. C, Lot hesitated, but the men grabbed their hands and led them out of the city. They told them to flee to the mountains and don't look back. D. Lot begged to run to a town nearby because he wouldn't make it to the mountains. So I did some looking into this a few weeks ago as we were getting into this, and nobody really knows. So what happened to Sodom and the cities of the plains and the entire plains that became, wasteland? Um, we know that God instituted something, but it sounds very similar to sort of natural disaster. We know that this is a place where tar pits exist, and perhaps there was volcanic activity of some sort, although there's not. Um, we just don't know what really happened. And of course, it's our tendency to try to find some natural explanation for what God did. But this place became desolate. It says it destroyed all the vegetation. We were talking about when Lot chose that place to go. And that's when I was kind of looking at this. When Lot chose that place to go, did it look so desolate as it does to us now? We don't even know where these cities actually were. And so, because they're destroyed. So, it seems like there was vegetation there, that it was a nice valley with some sort of life, and it became utter destruction. See, the Lord destroyed everything in the plain, and Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt herself. So, um, obviously, this has been used many times um, as a metaphor um, for the kind of thing that Jesus said when he said, anybody that puts his hand to the plow and looks back. So, looking back carries with it sort of a desire for what was. Um, and there's a sense that um, when the world, when God calls us out of the world because the culture is a mess and it's going to be destroyed, that we have a tendency to look back and sort of long for that, and that if we are longing for that, then we're part of it, we're part of the problem. And so certainly this has been used as a metaphor many, many times for longing for the things of this world when they are not the will of God, and they're subject to destruction. And if we long for them, we become subject to destruction. Um, and so here is Lot and his daughters, but not his wife and not his sons-in-law, who are rescued from this. So it seems like only three righteous that really believed that what was going on was wrong, and did not look back and long for it, and were willing to leave and understand that that would be the will of God. So we really need to think through this, given our propensity and our tendency in our culture to, first of all, place our sexuality first, place our sexual desires as something that deserve to be fulfilled no matter what way, ungodly way we choose to fulfill them. And if that seems normal to us, and that's a life that we sort of look back to and long for, rather than standing in the gap and saying, what you're doing is wrong, and this is what's right, and I'll be the one that stands for what's right, then we also will end up being destroyed with our world. And that's it's unpopular to say. It's unpopular to say even that focusing on sexuality is wrong. Um, so it's really amazing to me how we're even sexualizing children and young people, and um, some of the gender issues that we're discussing that are somehow put on to children who are not at the age of brain development to even really be thinking through seriously their decisions. Um, and not only that, but they're heavily influenced by the thinking of the people around them, which is ungodly. So um, I think that there's a lot of damage being done, and we need to be the ones standing in the gap. Let me just say um, that we need to be people of love, people who would protect and would advocate, people who would have grace, um, but also we need to stand for what's right, and not be okay with the wrong things that are done all around us.